Go ahead and get started. Pursuant to the governor's executive order to avoid gatherings of more than 10 and the governor's March 16, 2020 suspension of certain provisions of the Texas Open Meetings Act, the May 19, 2020 meeting of the School Land Board meeting will be held by video conference call as authorized under Texas Government Code Section 551, TAC 125. Access to the meeting by members of the public will be published in advance in the Texas Register in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Any member of the public who wishes to address the board on a matter within authority of the board should indicate so at the start of the meeting or during any public comment period. The chairman, me, can limit the length of time available to each individual. So first item of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting on April 21st. And after the board has had a chance to review and assuming no questions, comments, or objections, I could entertain a motion to confirm the minutes for the record.
So moved.
We approve as presented.
Second.
A motion is made and seconded and is carries unanimously to approve the minutes. Number 2 is the consent agenda as posted. After the board has had a chance to review that and assuming no questions or comments, could entertain a motion for the record.
I'll move.
Second.
Motion is made, carries unanimously to approve the consent agenda as posted.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Scott, you were on mute. Did you vote?
Yes, I voted. If I was not in agreement, I would have said, ho ho, it's not unanimous. But thanks for asking.
Okay, sorry about that, Commissioner.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Next item is number 3. And I believe we will have staff present this item for the consideration possible action to authorize proposed amendment to Title 31, Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 155, Subchapter A.
Yes, good morning, Commissioner, members of the board. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Andrew Hawkins, for the record, from Office of General Counsel. Also here with me for Coastal Field Operations on the line is Tony Williams, Senior Deputy Director for Coastal Field Operations. And the item on your agenda today under number 3 are proposed rule amendments to Chapter 155, specifically sections 155, 1, 2, .4, .5, and .15. And to briefly summarize the proposed rule changes, they focus on clarifications and streamlining of procedures with respect to renewals of coastal leases for public purposes, transfers of cabin permits, recording associated with structure registrations, and fees for vegetative cover and riprap only projects. And just to go through those in a little more detail, but somewhat quickly, I'll address first the item dealing with renewal of coastal leases. The coastal leases in particular that we're talking about here are public purpose coastal leases, generally little to nominal fees involved for public purpose projects, typically issued to structures such as county boat ramps, public fishing piers, and other projects that do not change much over time. So what the proposed rule change would do is to allow the commissioner to approve a renewal without taking the item before the board. And this is assuming that and provided that all the previous lease conditions have been met and that no modifications have been made to the structure. If that is not the case, it would come back before the board. But this fits with general practice with regards to other instruments that have little to no impacts. And the idea is to save board time and resources and GLO staff time and resources. The next change I'd like to touch on in 155.4 is regarding the transfer of cabin permits. This is simply a clarification to put back into the administrative code provision allowing for the transfer of cabin permits. This has always been the practice of the board, but it has not been in the administrative code because it was actually deleted inadvertently. And so this would now put it back into the code to clarify that such transfers are allowed. In 155.5 regarding recording of structure registrations, this is a very minor change in the sequence and a reordering within the section itself of a subsection that deals with recording structure registrations. Structure registrations are generally residential piers of a very limited size and certain set of dimensions, and this clarification would simply, as I said, reorder the sequence within the section to state that recording is an obligation of the structure registrant upon issuance of the structure registration. As it currently stands, it's put in with the requirements for applying for structure registration. And that hasn't made a great deal of sense to try to administer in the past, given how many of these instruments there are. The last main change I wanted to talk about, and this deals with both definition in 155.1 as well as the fee figures in 155.15, is a clarification regarding projects that involve vegetative cover or riprap only. And what the changes in the proposed rule amendments do are simply clarify that that is a no rent type of project. And the reason it has to be addressed in the fee tables is because there's currently a bit of an internal inconsistency in those tables where it states that clearly it's a component of a project that has no rent, but the table also states otherwise that there is a minimum rent required. But the practice is in these projects to always not require a rent in fitting with the beneficial nature of the projects and minimal to no impacts. So this would clarify that in the fee tables. It would also clarify the definition of shoreline stabilization projects and to allow vegetative cover and riprap only projects to always be considered under a coastal easement category 1, which is the lowest category, or the lowest category of coastal easements, and that are generally processed out of the field office. And so again, this is another change that would improve the administration and increase the efficiency of the administration of the Coastal Public Land Program. I think that about summarizes the changes. Again, if there are questions, we'd be happy to answer them, myself or Tony Williams. Otherwise, staff would be recommending that the board authorize, I would respectfully request that the board authorize publication of the proposed amendments in the next issue of the Texas Register.
This is Scott Rorman. I have a quick question, please.
Yes, sir.
Is there any controversy or any known potential controversy with any of this?
I would have to say, and I would let Tony Williams answer as well. Certainly not. We've taken these up with an eye toward that, and with the fee changes in particular, it's not anything that's going to impose any economic costs, additional economic costs, direct economic costs on any person who has to comply with these requirements. So they're really all in the nature of clarifications of existing practice or improving the efficiency of the administration of the program. So,
all right. Well, I will move to approve with one other potential question.
Yes, sir.
The riprap, I have no problem with, but I would there's just something in me that says I don't want that to be misinterpreted later too, and somebody, some oil and gas guy or some guy who wants to build a commercial pier starts putting in riprap. In other words, I would probably want to say, so long as it's not for a commercial purpose.
Right, and that is, it's a very good point. As drafted, the rules do not allow for a riprap only project that is commercial to be necessarily taken out of the board's consideration. So that's certainly that it is discretionary for one thing, the way the change is worded to consider a riprap only project as a coastal easement 1, category 1 residential project. So with that discretionary component in mind, I know that Tony Williams and Coastal Field Operations can ensure that anything that is associated with a commercial project will come before the board.
Yes, sir. This is Tony Williams with Coastal Field Operations. Just to clarify, we have guidance for riprap that clarifies it is for shoreline stabilization only. If it is more than is necessary for shoreline stabilization, it is treated as fill. And fill does have a fee component associated with it. So if someone goes out and puts out maybe 50 feet of riprap beyond what is necessary, we would treat that as fill, and that would be a fee structure that would have to come before the board if it was commercial.
All right, then I move to approve what staff has recommended.
Gentlemen, this is Michael Neal. I have one quick question. On the coastal lease renewals, are those renewals negotiated, or are they based on a rate table? And then I saw in there that said, provided no modifications have been made or proposed, are those modifications to the lease agreement or modifications to the structure itself?
Yes, sir. Most of the coastal leases have no rent associated with them. A lot of these are to Parks and Wildlife or the counties, and so there's no rent. These are free public piers or public boat ramps, so this will not affect the rent in any way. Most of these structures are unchanged at renewal. If there are any changes to the structure, it will be brought back to the board. But if it is a renewal with no changes to the structure or to the fee, it can be approved without going to the board according to this proposal. If there are any changes to the structure or any fee changes, it will be brought to the board.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. I'll second Scott's motion.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from the board? We have a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those against, say nay. The motion carries unanimously to approve item number 3. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Tony, for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, members of the board.
I still think Tony's background is the best that I've seen this far in this pandemic. Best virtual background right there.
Thank you.
He's got skin in the game on this issue. Items 4 and 5, I'm sorry, will be held in executive session. We'll enter into executive session pursuant to Chapter 551, Subchapter D, Section 551, Tech 071 of the Government Code for discussion consideration regarding contemplated litigation, settlement offers, or seeking or receiving attorney advice or counsel-related items 4 and 5 on the docket. We'll also enter into session subject to subsection 551.072 for discussion consideration concerning purchase, sale, exchange, lease, or value of real property related to items 4 and 5 in the docket. Following executive session, we'll reconvene in open session to complete the docket. I'm going to ask that visitors remain on the Zoom call as board and essential personnel will return to the Zoom call following executive session. Corey will be running point and running the Zoom room in the meantime. I believe all members of the board and personnel have the conference line available. Let me know if you don't, and we'll get that over to you.
Commissioner, this is Gil. I don't have it. Or at least it's not working on my iPad, so can you guys resend it to me?
Yeah, if you'll resend it to me too, just in case. I'm in the car and I'm not sure I have it.
Stephanie, do you mind routing that over?
I will send that to them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Gil, I sent it on you.
Good morning. While the board is in executive session, are there any members of the general public who would like to make a comment? If so, please let me know in the website chat, the Zoom chat. You can just submit a comment anytime before they return from executive session, or indicate that you're wanting to make a comment, and I will inform the board. Thank you.
The open session of the May 19, 2020 School Land Board meeting will now resume with item number 4.
Good morning, Amber Long, Asset Management. Staff recommends approval of the sale of tax foreclosure land per the terms discussed in executive session as being in the best interest of the state. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the board at this time?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
A motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 4. Next item on the agenda is number 5. Thank you, Amber.
David Wells with Asset Management, and staff recommends approval of docket item number 5 as presented in executive session.
Any questions?
To approve as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded with 1 abstention from the chairman to approve item number 5. Next item on the agenda is number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, for the record, Rusty Martin, Chief Investment Officer. Approval of this agenda item will constitute your approval of the release of funds from the Real Estate Special Fund account, which I'll call the RESPA, to the Permanent School Fund Liquid account for a temporary investment by the State Board of Education until needed by the General Land Office to fund capital calls related to new and existing School Land Board investments in the RESPA. As you will recall, HB 4388 in the last legislative session amended Section 51 of the Natural Resources Code by adding a Section 51.414 called the Permanent School Fund Liquid Account. The main purpose of that bill was to create the liquid account in order to provide for the temporary investment by the State Board of Education of money in the RESPA committed by the School Land Board to new and existing investments awaiting capital calls by the School Land Board's external investment managers. The bill gives SBOE the authority to invest the money in the liquid account and liquid assets, to keep any investment income or related capital gains from those liquid assets, and to use the funds in the liquid account to pay for any administrative costs associated with managing the liquid account. In conjunction with the creation of the liquid account, School Land Board is required by Section 51.414B to adopt a resolution to temporarily release from the RESPA funds that are not required for the School Land Board's anticipated cash needs for the 90-day period following the date of the meeting. If the cash needs subsequently exceed the amount available in the RESPA during the period, then the SBOE is required to release an amount requested by the School Land Board within 5 business days of the request. It's a short history of releases from the RESPA to the liquid account. The original release was approved by the board on August 29th of last year. That release was $3.9 billion. That was the original release. That was completed on September 3rd. And then on December 17th of last year, the board approved a $145 million release to the liquid account. And that money was subsequently released on January the 15th. About $2.8 billion of the total amount that's been released to the liquid account represents capital that has already been committed to specific GLO investments, but it hasn't been called by the external managers yet. Since the money was released to the liquid account, the State Board has invested about $1.7 billion of the total amount. They've invested it in a liquid fixed income portfolio that mimics Bloomberg Barclays U.S. Aggregate 1 to 3 year index. It has a duration of about 1.2 years. It's currently yielding about 2.05%. By way of comparison, the Treasury pool now is yielding somewhere around 1.2%. It has a duration that's fairly similar to that. And as provided by the bill, the State Board has released approximately $25 million of income and realized gains from the liquid account into the permanent school fund. We're estimating that our cash needs for the next 90-day period is going to be approximately $330 million. There's currently approximately $458 million that's being held in the RESPA at the Treasury. And we're estimating that about $318 million in revenue will be deposited into the RESPA from royalties and investment earnings during the period. Therefore, we're estimating that the balance at the end of the period will be about $446 million. The board has targeted a 5% cash position in the portfolio. Most recent market value is $4.3 billion. So a 5% cash position would be about $215 million. Therefore, we're recommending that you release $200 million from the RESPA to the liquid account and retain the remainder to meet anticipated cash needs during the period. Of course, we will continue to monitor the situation and prepare these reports as required in accordance with the bill. So in accordance with the requirements of Section 414B, Natural Resources Code, I'm recommending that you release $200 million from the RESPA to the liquid account during the period May 19th today through June 30th for investment by the State Board of Education in accordance with the provisions of Section 51.414 and retain the amount remaining in the RESPA to meet school and board's anticipated cash needs during the period. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple.
Sure.
A couple things. Is the $318 million that you're anticipating coming in from oil and gas royalties, bonus investment earnings, is that a number that can be annualized or is it fairly lumpy? What is that number, for example, in a year?
It's been running all revenues coming in, which is predominantly oil and gas royalties and investment earnings. It's been running somewhere around $1 billion a year for the past 3 years.
Okay.
And it's not, I wouldn't say, when you say lumpy from a timing perspective, I'll say it's pretty stable throughout the year.
Okay. And my next question is, has the money would you anticipate that the money that's been invested in the fixed income portfolio with SBOE, would you say that it is likely appreciated since it was invested to today's mark to market? Given what's
yes, there is some appreciation in there. In fact, they told me that about $2 million of the $25 million that was released represented gains.
Okay. So I guess my question is, are we surprised that after 8 months or 9 months, we have only invested 45% of the money that's been released?
Well, I can't really comment on the pace of investment for a group that we're not involved with. They have their own schedule for investing that money. I will say that the money there's no money that's uninvested. So the money that they have not invested in the portfolio that they're building is invested in the Treasury pool at the state Treasury. So it's earning that yield that the Treasury pool earns.
So it's earning about 1 versus this portfolio.
Yeah, it's roughly 1.2 right now. It's been steadily decreasing, as you know. Started the year, it was probably closer to 2%, and it's gradually gone down as market rates have go down basically to zero.
So bottom line is
I think one thing to consider is they're investing that portfolio across a wide spectrum of fixed income assets. Mm-hmm. So while it would be fairly easy to put that's quite a bit of money to put to work outside, if you're doing anything outside of highly liquid securities like U.S. Treasuries or agencies. And, you know, their goal is to create a higher yield. So they're looking at areas that are not as, they're more thinly traded. There's not as much volume. And it probably is going to take them some period of time to get that money fully invested. Now, what that period of time is, I don't know. I'm sure that they're moving as quickly as they can. And
Okay.
beyond that,
Rusty, I got a question. So when you advance this $200 million, does that mean that we have $4.2 billion within the SBOE that is property of the land board? That question is, it's held for the account of the land board?
It's part of the permanent school fund. It's not on our books anymore, but we have the right to call 100% of it within 5 business days notice. That's highly unlikely that we would ever do that, but theoretically we have that capability to do.
Okay, but this goes back to that whole argument about a year, 2 years ago, right? I mean, when that money was within the school land board, you were investing it yourself. We were investing that. So it's just a difference of school land board doing the investment versus the SBOE.
Well, technically, not quite. We were required by statute to hold any money that we have not invested in the asset classes that we invest in at the state treasury. And so the money, the cash, the uninvested cash, has been held at the state treasury and invested by the comptroller in the treasury pool.
Okay. So theoretically, incrementally, we should be getting a better return because they're not investing in treasuries or as much as treasuries. They're actually going into more higher yield investments.
Theoretically, yes. And I think initially they will invest the portfolio in a very liquid, low risk group of securities. And then over time, as the program stabilizes and we have a really good sense of how fast that money will be called, I think that they will expand that investment portfolio across even less liquid classes. I think that's their plan. But right now, completely liquid securities.
This is Scott. This is Scott. Todd and Gil, I appreciate your questions. Russ, just a little more color on that. I think the real kind of grab was the earnings on the money that's been transferred out. Even though we have the right to call the principal, the earnings on that money is no longer adding to our principal. It's rather adding to the SBOE's principal. Is that right?
Okay, but it's all part of the permanent school fund. So it's not really SBOE versus school land board. It's permanent school fund money. It's still there whether we have it at the treasury or whether SBOE is investing it. It's in the permanent school fund. Theoretically, they want to demonstrate that they can earn a higher return.
Yeah, and so it's all going for the benefit of the Texas school children, which is what we all want. But that's not money that the school land board through you will be able to invest. It will be invested through some other entity, which is okay. It's just the fact that the legislature decided to do that and we live with it. I don't know that it matters. I just want to make sure we understand it.
That's correct. In the past, any earnings from cash that we were controlling that was in the RESPA would have been invested at the Treasury, and that money, the earnings on that money would have accumulated to that pool of money in the Treasury. The only difference now is that SBOE is investing that money, and the earnings are accumulating to the pool that they're investing, and they are allowed to remove the income and gains from those investments. It still stays in the permanent school fund.
And I don't know that this is something you need to comment on if you don't want to, Rusty, because it may not be in your purview, but it's my understanding that, again, it doesn't really matter to us. It's the legislature's decision, but just as a point of fact, the SBOE is required by statute to invest 50% of all its money into curriculum. And so that's a statutory obligation of the school board of education. It's my understanding.
I believe you're talking about how the money they release to the available school fund is allocated.
Yep. I believe that's right.
I'm sure I don't have all the facts exactly right, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understood the general concepts there.
So I have another question, if I don't mind, Rusty.
Of course.
So we're at $4 billion that's already being managed today. We're putting another $200 million over there. Plus we're keeping, sounds like roughly $200 million in cash staying within your purview. So when you add it all up, that's about $4.4 billion of liquidity, of $4.2 billion managed by them and $200 million plus or minus managed by you, versus capital commitments of about $2.8 billion that are unfunded. So that's about a $1.4 billion excess in terms of cash versus commitments. Is that
right?
Am I on track so far?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. And we got about $1 billion coming in a year from the existing royalties, leases, etc. Right?
Right.
Okay. So I think my question for you is, what do you feel like is the right ratio of cash to commitments to have, given those dynamics, given the current cushion plus the $1 billion coming in versus getting, versus having more investment? What's your mindset? I just love how you think about, in general, how you think about that ratio.
So the way that we approach, I'm just going to read between the lines here. I think what you're asking, the way that we approach how much we decide to invest during the year is based on a lot of factors. Certainly the revenues that we expect to come in across the portfolio, not just in royalties, but also investment earnings and any lease income and that type of thing. Measured against the amounts that we're going to release to the available school fund and or to the permanent school fund. And we weigh those against the investment opportunities that we expect that we will see during the year after consulting with our investment consultant. And the past few years, there are a lot of investment opportunities. There have been a lot of investment opportunities. So we basically have been committing or agreeing to commit. When I say we, I'm talking about the Investment Advisory Committee, about $1.5 billion a year, somewhere in 1.2 to 1.5 billion a year. And so the number that you're talking about that's available that's a pretty normal number. We met earlier this year, and I think we targeted $1.5 billion for the year. Obviously, things have changed quite a bit. It's been very difficult to look at deals. There aren't very many deals out there right now. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market, and markets really, these kind of markets, private markets, they don't react to things like public markets do, as you know very well, because you've been in the business for a long time. So those markets have just basically pause, let's say. They hit the pause button and they're evaluating things. There are going to be opportunities, tremendous opportunities. And those are things that we look forward to taking advantage of. And you've done the math and you know that on a portfolio-wide basis, we're about 65% funded and we have 35% unfunded commitments. So that's a substantial amount of money that's available to us to take advantage of these opportunities as they arise with the managers, both through the fund investments that we have, but also the possibility of co-investment alongside of these managers, which we constantly are pursuing. And we fully expect are going to see some significant co-investment opportunities that materialize. It may be a while though. Again, these markets, they move much more slowly than public markets. And it may be even into 2021 before we really start seeing the most attractive opportunities open up. But they're going to be there, and we'll take advantage of them when we see them. If that didn't answer your question, please let me know if there's anything else I can.
I think for now it does, Rusty. I may call you offline and just have a conversation, just to educate myself just a little bit more. But thank you for that.
Okay, great, no problem.
I have no further questions.
Any questions from the board?
I'll make a motion we adopt the resolution to release the funds as presented.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 6. And for what it's worth, we can bring this issue up with the State Board of Education when we meet jointly, and it appears we have scheduled that meeting for June 4th, and I believe it will be held virtually. Appreciate everybody's work. Assuming no questions or objections from council, and there being no further business before the board, we could hereby adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.